impact of disasters on food insecurity and operations, and the role city, state, and federal government programs can play to support communities during their time of need. And I see that we have a lot of people in this room. This is a critical program right now, as we saw the end of the SNAP benefit that helped so many people during the pandemic. So now we go back to our regular SNAP benefit. Our programs such as City Harvest and the various food pantries we have across the city, many of which your organizations help support, like our friends at APNA, and thank goodness for ICNA and our Muslim friends who created halal food pantries across the city. So now I'm going to give you a little introduction about the speakers, and then I'll let them go right into their program. So we're going to start with our middle speaker. Jerome Nathaniel is Director of Policy and Government Relations at City Harvest. He's been a part of the fight for food justice ever since helping out at pantries and shelters. He's a native, he's in New York, so we need you Brooklynites know what he's talking about there. He's an avid blogger and writer for Mike's digital political news platform for Millennial in 2012. He's also written a host of investigative articles about food policy and urban gardens across East New York. On the far end, we have Keith Carr, Senior Policy and Government Relations Manager at City Harvest. He works to advance the organization's hunger, food insecurity policy priorities, and keeps abreast of the timely city, state, and federal policies and proposed legislation, and the implication on City Harvest clients and emergency feeding partners, and develops advocacy strategy around key issues. And lastly, directly to my left, Racine Lee Droz, Senior Director of Operations and Disaster Response, and someone that I've watched work over the years on NYC BOADs, in their operations. She earned her MPA with a focus on nonprofit management from Marist College, an advanced certification in emergency management from John Jay College, and a Bachelor of Arts in Crime, Law, and Justice with a minor in sociology from the Pennsylvania State University. So please welcome City Harvest.
Thank you so much for having us. How's everyone doing? Bellies are full? Hopefully that didn't put you to sleep. All right, well, I'm gonna walk around. So my name is Racine Droz. I'm the Senior Director of Operations and Disaster Response at City Harvest. I've been with the organization for 15 years. So I want to first start off by thanking New York City Emergency Management and Baruch for having us here today. It's such a pleasure to be able to present to you guys. So what we're looking to make sure that you're leaving with this presentation is that there is an understanding of what programs are available for communities to learn about, so that when a disaster happens, you know who your contacts are, or at least what programs are available to support you guys during your time of need. So that's the big takeaway. So let's begin with who we are. So we represent City Harvest. It's a nonprofit organization that feeds hungry families. So we are New York City's private source for hunger. We are the largest food rescue organization. So this year we will rescue 75 million pounds of excess food, and that's all delivered free of charge. We work with over 400 programs. And we pick up a good variety of retail foods. We work with farmers, we work with brokers. There's a large variety of items that we receive. So fun fact, what a lot of people don't know is that City Harvest has been involved with disasters for a long time. Going back all the way to 9/11. Did everybody know that? This is an engaging presentation. So did everybody know that we've been involved with that? I got one hand. Okay, I got a few. So with that, I'm gonna just move a little bit because it's over here. So we've rescued and delivered over 10 million pounds of food during 9/11. So that was around if you guys remember the economic crisis, we were getting into that, to that mode. So we did have to listen to our neighborhoods and see what the need was, so that we had to increase our poundage to 10 million pounds for that. That led into the 2008 financial crisis, where then we rescued and delivered an additional 5 million pounds. We were also part of the Superstorm Sandy in 2012, where we partnered with, I see the FEMA table over here. So we did a lot of work with FEMA, we did a lot of work with Red Cross, and we've also done some work with a lot of our local communities to ensure that we were reaching the unmet needs in our city. So going to 2017, we did have a big role in during Hurricane Maria, Harvey, and Irma. So we did have staff that were deployed. We supported the food banks in Texas. We also supported some of the food banks in Florida. And then we also worked with our partners in Puerto Rico. So with that, we not only did we set up some communities, emergency community sites, we also increased our amount of food that we were rescuing and delivering to make sure that we're meeting the needs not only on our local side, but we also supported Feeding America with putting boxes out to Puerto Rico to support those communities as well. We also did some work in 2018 for Hurricane Florence with the Carolinas, so they were impacted as well. And then the government shut down. So in 2018 and 2019, we worked directly with those that were impacted with the federal employees that were not getting paid. We set up around several airports where we then distributed food to those families or those members that didn't know when they were going to get paid again. So we said, you know what, let's help you out, and we were able to provide a distribution then. Everyone knows we were, right, COVID, and that had a huge impact on our operations, where we went full disaster mode like everyone else. So with that, if you recall what happened in New York City directly, you had the restaurants that were impacted, which we do get a lot of food from restaurants. So the restaurants shut down, and then also, right, we had to shelter in place, which meant that that was a big impact on operations where people don't realize, right? New York City is still on an island. In order to get into the city, you have to go over those bridges, you have to travel over bodies of water. So that had a huge impact on our transportation, where a lot of those, when we were in the epicenter of the pandemic, a lot of those trucks weren't coming over. And that's why, if you recall, during the COVID in the very beginning, a lot of supermarkets had empty shelves. Produce that was spoiling, right? Because we also didn't have the laborers working directly on the farms to pull those products out to be able to fill our tables. So all of that happened in waves where City Harvest worked really hard with our partners to see how we can source more food to be able to get it out to those that needed it, and just keep everything going. Now, I did put a little tidbit here for the asylum seekers, but I also want to point out, though we are not directly supporting working with asylum seekers, a lot of the food programs that we work with, as I mentioned before, 400 programs, a lot of our agencies we're doing that work. So we've worked with the mutual aid groups. City Harvest is also a part of New York City BOAD, where we partner with those nonprofits that are actually doing the work. So what's happening is when our agencies receive their food, as part of our general operations, we're picking up excess food from retailers, supermarkets, we deliver it, and then those programs are utilizing that to support the demand in their areas. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Keith. So you want to take it from here?
Great, thanks, Racine. So I want to talk a little bit about food insecurity. How many people here know what food insecurity is? All right, almost everybody. And how many people here have been food insecure themselves? How many people are food insecure now? Thank you. And so basically food insecurity, it really can affect anyone, especially in New York City. This is one of the most expensive places to live in the world. And food insecurity, you're basically sacrificing food to make sure you have somewhere to live. You're sacrificing food to make sure that your lights stay on, make sure your gas stays on, make sure your children have what they need for school, or make sure you have car fare. A few years back when I was consulting, I never considered myself to be food insecure, but I would say, oh, I'm in between a contract, I'm just waiting for a check to come in. And I would bring that extra plate of food home from church or stop by my cousin's house to, hey, what are you doing? Oh, we're about to sit down and eat. And then suddenly I just ring the doorbell, hey, I'm right outside. And go over there to eat. But I never considered myself to be food insecure. I never thought about going to a food pantry. I never thought about getting on food stamps. And I think that's more people than realize are food insecure than they really realize that they are. So I started with City Harvest back in 2011, and at that time we were struggling to get to like 20 million pounds of food rescued and delivered. And then as we were edging towards our 30th anniversary, we're been a big campaign to 30 million pounds for 30 years. But the rates of food insecurity in New York City and across the country continued to go up. We were coming out of the recession, the 2008 recession, and had a booming economy. But why is food insecurity still increasing? And it's been steadily increasing up until today. And we can talk about all the systemic racial injustices and all the reasons why that's happening. But the real matter is that if we drill down to a New York City perspective, like this city is just really too expensive for people to live and to be able to thrive. For the last few years, we've been conducting a self-sufficiency standard study that showed that for the federal poverty guidelines, really, we need to throw them out of the window when it comes to determining poverty in New York City, food insecurity in New York City, because no one can live off of $20,000 a year, not in New York City, and not need some type of subsistence, not need some type of support. And so in our self-sufficiency standard study, we renamed that to the True Cost of Living study, which will be released very shortly in the next couple of days. We found that it's really more like $70,000 that a family of three needs to be able to go to the grocery store, which may not be in your neighborhood anymore because of development in a lot of our areas. Gentrification is one of the #1 causes of food insecurity. I always say that the poor people in a gentrifying neighborhood, the people that live in public housing, the people that live in their grandparents' home for generations, they're trapped behind enemy lines. Your neighborhood's changing around you, and the supermarket you used to go to that would give you credit is no longer there. Now it's a luxury high-rise. Now it's a small boutique supermarket that charges more, the food's not familiar. Your laundromat that you used to go to all the time is no longer there, so that's a car fare to get to the laundromat. Now the laundromat's a high-rise apartment building. Most New Yorkers don't have washers and dryers in their apartments, so you have to wash your clothes, so that's car fare to get to and pull back and forth to do the things that most normal people would do in another neighborhood. So food insecurity, all these factors go into really creating the equation for someone to become food insecure. You can make a good salary. New York City has the highest unemployment, the highest minimum wage throughout the country, but $15 an hour is not enough. So, food insecure folks, people have to work 2 or 3 different jobs just to make ends meet. So, as I said, we've seen the numbers continue to increase. You can look at the statistics here. These statistics, we really want to show the impact of COVID, the things that Racine was talking about, like the supply chain issues, and there's people, but also when the city shut down, a lot of people either had reduced hours at work or they left their jobs no longer existed. So that increased the amount of people that needed emergency food. Children were really affected. Once the schools closed, most families rely at least two out of the 3 meals a day are prepared and delivered to children at school, breakfast and lunch. So now if your child is at home with you, that's a huge expense on a family. Now I have to figure out how to cook breakfast, I have to figure out how to cook lunch. And so these families resorted more to emergency food. So the amount of pounds that we had to rescue and deliver went up from, we were forecasted to do about 68 million pounds in 2019, 2020. Over the course of the deep pandemic years, we rescued and delivered close to 250 million pounds of food. And that was with the same amount of trucks, or less employees. But City Harvest did it. I mean, that's what we do. As Racine said, a disaster happens, and this is what we do. Went from Hurricane Sandy to Irma to Maria. This is what we do. People need food. City Harvest is there to rescue and deliver. But I always say that that the food insecurity is sort of the canary in the coal mine. To really know the impact of a disaster and how it affects the supply chain, how it really affects the food environment. Everyone is always taught to, I wish the commissioner was still here, but we're talking about go bags, but in preparing for a disaster, we're always told to have at least 2 weeks worth of food in your home in case something happens. A snowstorm or whatever it is. So most people have that 2 weeks worth of food. I mean, you may not want to eat it, and that's why those cans are in the back of the pantry, and that's why that meat, you don't know what it is. Is it steak? Is it chicken? I don't know what it is, but it's in the freezer. But if push comes to shove, I'll eat it. So we have that. But one thing that, like particularly with Hurricane Sandy, I love watching Mother Nature wreak havoc on the world. So right after Sandy, I just got in my car and rode around, like Red Hook, and rode down to Coney Island. And I was in Red Hook, the grocery store that I used to go to, this Fairway, and I saw, the workers were, everything was, this is after the water had receded and everything. And I called my boss, I'm like, well, what are we going to do? She's like, what do you mean? Like, a lot of these areas are going to have a grocery store for at least a month or 2 months. And I said those same the 2 weeks, got food for 2 weeks. Like, if my neighborhood lost our grocery store, and remember, the trains weren't running, a lot of communities, the trains weren't running, the buses weren't running, everything was underwater, like our entire fleet ended up being underwater. So we had to rent trucks to sort of pivot. And she was like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. So then we mounted our response to Hurricane Sandy. And a lot of the things that we learned from Hurricane Sandy and the other disasters are what really helped us respond to the COVID crisis. A lot of our pantries ended up closing down because most food pantries are run by churches, temples, mosques, synagogues. They were closed. A lot of people got sick. A lot of people died. That's sad reality. So we lost, I'd say, about 30% of our food pantries shut down. And so we created these pop-up distributions to help people get food. But we learned how to do that particularly from Hurricane Sandy, going into areas where there was nowhere else to do it except on the side of a road or in a rec center or wherever. When you look at food insecurity, like I said, it's really the canary in the coal mine. But beyond emergency food, I'm going to pass it to Jerome, beyond emergency food, there are a lot of other things that government does, state, local, and city government, that they do to prevent people from needing emergency food, but also in the face of a pandemic or face of an emergency, you can access food. So.
Great, thanks, Keith. And I think a really interesting thing that Keith spoke about is that a lot of that need, food insecurity, income insufficiency, poverty, existed well before COVID, well before crises. A lot of the timeline that Racine shared was over the past 2 decades. So we know that this is a need that really exists beyond crises. It's chronic. It's something that is not just exacerbated during these crises, but really revealed. The curtain is kind of pulled that need already existed, and someone that was living paycheck to paycheck, as he spoke about, already needed some of these services. And that's really consistent in the way that a lot of advocates operate as well. A lot of these programs you're about to see are things that advocates such as City Harvest and others were asking for well before COVID, but there seemed to not be a lot of political will, or there were some challenges in figuring out how can it get funded, how can we get this to the people that need it, how can we make sure that it is efficacious. When crisis struck, there was urgency, and then government got it done, and the advocates saw the things that we needed before happen. The issue that we're running with now is that these programs really should be staying in place, because although we're slightly walking out of the crises, that chronic food insecurity still exists. So quickly walking through some of the programs that we saw come up. You saw, or you might have heard this at the very beginning, there's a lot of changes to the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. For the past 3 years, everyone got what we called emergency allotments. That means that their SNAP benefits were brought up to the maximum amount allowed for their household. So just take this example. If you were a single household making the minimum amount of SNAP benefits in 2020 before COVID, you were making $16 a month, only $16. $16 a month. Now you get about 2 dozen eggs and that's it, right? When COVID happened, it brought them to the maximum amount allowed for that household size. That's $281. Imagine relying on that bump up, 16 to 281 for 3 years, and then suddenly, March 1st, you don't see it anymore. That's what people are facing, right? Because COVID is over, right? But the crises and the chronic hunger is still here. Some other examples, you heard about school food. There was this incredible program called Pandemic EBT. That means that if your access to school meals was disrupted during COVID-19, or if your school schedule changed, you automatically, no questions asked, no application, received a debit card loaded with equal amount of dollars to what the school would have spent to buy your meal at school. So that was about $125 a month that each child was receiving. I'm happy to say that through advocacy, that's going to continue every summer for every child, called Summer EBT. There's also emergency rental assistance program. Sometimes we learn things and then we were able to build the will to make them stick around. There's an emergency rental assistance program. So something like that existed before COVID, but it made it easier for low-income folks to get rental assistance, especially after the eviction moratorium, when folks were finding out that they had months and months of rent still due. And then finally, child tax credit, which gave all parents an extra $300 a month, regardless of whether or not they work, to get money to take care of your child. And by the way, most of that money was used to buy food. That's according to the Census Pulse survey. They were doing surveys every other week. They showed that most people were using their child tax credit to feed their child. So those first set of interventions I think are kind of interesting. So when we think of crises, we think of providing basic needs like food or addressing infrastructure, but those are really focused on sort of economic interventions. These I think are a little bit more familiar when we're talking about disaster response. These were federal, state, and city programs that provided food for organizations like City Harvest, a bunch of mutual aid groups to be able to do the work and feed that growing number of folks that were in need of food. That first one up there, Farmers to Family Food Box program through the federal government, was huge. He talked about that expansion and how many pounds we were doing. We were thinking we were going to do about around 70 million pounds of food, which was a huge number to me. That was before COVID. Suddenly, when COVID happened and unemployment went from 4% to 20% that summer, the Farmers to Family program allowed us to do a significant amount of more pounds. That's why over the course of the pandemic, the 2+ years, we were able to do over, well over 200 million pounds. 35 million of those pounds came through that Farmers to Food Box program. There's Nourish New York. Again, I'm happy to say advocacy one is that it's now a permanent program. Through advocacy, The idea existed before COVID, the will was built during COVID, and the advocacy allowed it to stick around, so now we're able to source local New York State product and give that to New Yorkers in need. And then finally, there's the umbrellas Get Food, where if you call 311, you say you needed food, then the city was working with actually the Taxi and Limousine Commission to have meals delivered to people's household. That kind of kept evolving to different iterations. So what they call the pandemic food rescue emergency distribution. And while that program has expired, in many ways it was like that Farmers and Family, but from New York City, they have folded in a lot of those learnings into other city programs that still exist, the Community Food Connection Program to be exact. So I know that's a lot, but I did think it was important to sort of highlight the different ways that disaster response can look from that sort of traditional emergency physical response, and then also the sort of government intervention. I'm going to pass it over to Racine.
Okay, so this is the interactive part. So this side of the room, I'm gonna give you guys Hurricane Sandy. Actually, let's start from this side of the mic, right? Hurricane Sandy. From this part to this group of people here, this side of the mic, we'll get COVID. And then everything after this, we're gonna ask you to take the asylum seekers. So, and then for those that are joining us virtually, we have a live chat going on. So if you can just pick a category and respond to those questions in the chat, and we'll have someone read it out to us later on. So what we're looking to do, and if we can get one volunteer from each area to just read out what their responses are, that would be great. And there's mics here as well. So the 3 questions are: how did your organization prepare? 2, what were the most effective ways government helped you respond to the disaster? Or 3, thinking of future disasters, how can you leverage lessons learned from past disasters? Now, a lot of the things that I'm also hearing from my interactions with other community partners is some groups don't even have a disaster plan. And that's okay too, you can share that, right? So maybe also if someone wants to volunteer that information, you can say, hey, you know what, we see that there's a desire for this, and you can pretty much explain the reason why in that. Is that clear? Does that make sense? I'm getting nods? Okay. So let's just take a few minutes. Let me just get a time check. Jill, how are we doing on time? Oh, sorry. Okay. So let's just take about like 5 minutes. I know that, and if you need a little more time, we'll do a quick check-in. But let's just take this time right now to just jot down, and if you want, we're okay with groups on your table, or if you want to move over and join another table. I'm seeing some smiles. We're good on that? All right, so let's do that, and 1, 2, 3, break, and then we'll regroup.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla Greenish. I am with FEMA, but I am reporting out as NYSHA and the Southwest Emergency Network. We kind of went back and forth with a few agencies on the response. So for number 1 question, we have that some organizations were not prepared at all, and there was prep that was needed, but it was not provided. And we also have some people volunteering in organizations. After Sandy hit, they all met and discussed a plan. And some people were also CERT members, so they were able to jump into action right away. For number 2, one thing that the organizations developed relationships with the health department to get medications to people. And we talked a lot about the Occupy Sandy partnership, where they knock door to door to check on seniors, to provide medications to people, see what was needed, and if everyone was in good hands and safe. And then for number 3, we ran out of time. But one thing that we did say was the organizations that were not prepared at all for Sandy, they learned that they do need people to do been in this capacity. So we have people that are present here today that are working on building that capacity for the organization.
Great, thank you. Let's give them a round of applause.
Hi everyone, my name is Iram Hanif, and on this table, we have a group of other folks as well from APNA. So APNA is an organization located in South Brooklyn in Brighton Beach, one of the area which was hardest hit by Superstorm Sandy. And at that time, I personally was not present, but this is what my chairman and other colleagues share with me, that the situation was so devastating. There was no representation of the Muslim and minority groups over there. There was no center, there was no organization, there was no help for those community members by the administration of that time. So completely devastated situation. Nobody knows what's happening and how to deal it. Nobody was ready or prepared or had any knowledge. So the local pharmacies and the mosques, they took the lead and they themselves started putting things together. There was only one organization, ICNA Relief, which showed up in that neighborhood to support the local communities over there. Most of them were immigrants, refugees, low-income, non-English speakers. So that's the point when our chairman decided to open up a community center so that we can connect the dots, we can bring the resources back in those neighborhoods, in those communities. And that was, our organization came into existence, and from that day till now, 6 years I'm here, and we were able to navigate and become part of many bigger projects and CBOs, and working with NICEM right now with the Strengthening Communities project as well. And Frank from the other side on this table shared somewhat similar situations for the communities they serve in their neighborhoods, that they were also not prepared at the time of Superstorm Sandy, and he rightly said that as if they were not in existence at that time. Nobody knows that that community exists during the Superstorm Sandy, and from that moment they started and evolved and planned and start organizing on behalf of their community. So somewhat the table has a similar kind of situations and experiences during Superstorm Sandy and afterwards. Thank you.
How did your organization plan? So one of the items was following the business continuity plan. So your business food, okay, which implies then that you could help. Okay. Another one was there were existing plans for in serving community emergencies, but emergencies that had expected to be responded to were things like flu and neurovirus and stuff like that, which required then adaptation, and then also, of course, with the social distancing and masking, they couldn't use the drive-through and that type of circle interaction and use other plans for delivering food. So these are adaptation. There are other aspects of this, which was normal supplies like test kits and stuff like that, which had not been yet developed, and also had short distribution, had to be improvised. So I would say, those are the plans, and there's a lot of improvisation. Did I miss anything? No. Good. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. All right, let's give them a round of applause.
All right.
So we mostly just gave a lay of the land, like get a common understanding of what the asylum seeker situation is. We didn't really have time to get into many of the
Can you
specifics.
hold the mic a little closer to you? Thank
Yep.
you.
We didn't have time to get into many of the specifics, but we just gained a common understanding of what the situation is, some of the challenges that have arisen, and if anyone is interested in learning more about the asylum seeker crisis, at 2 p.m. there is a panel that I will be moderating that goes into it a little bit more in depth. Thank you.
Basically, what he said, that's what our conversations at City Harvest have been. We're monitoring the situation, and we'll see. We'll see.
Did the table in the back want to share anything?
What was the here never experienced asylum seekers in our community visit the location of our agencies, but I just want to highlight the language access law. So if your agency receive directly or indirectly receive a federal funding, as a Department of Justice has a law that you will have to provide the language access. So we involve Department of Education for language access initiative. So, the agency, we periodically meet and talk about how we can support each other, whether it's a Spanish group or Chinese or Korean, or, we just think about something to help our children's education in school, but parents also should be able to access the school information through the Department of Education in the website. Also, a lot of, the ISP cards and all the posters and Ruby bodegas and the community agency. So we try to strengthen the local agencies in church. So whether it's asylum seekers or just people who just immigrated to the United States, will be able to access the information.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm gonna pass it on to Jill. I think we have some things in the chat.
And thank all of you, thank you for giving us an interactive exercise, right? That's a great way to stay awake after lunch. So we have a couple of questions in the chat from our online attendees. And one comes from a resident council president. They prefer to keep their residents up to date with issues. They have the service in their development twice a month. Most people don't know when City Harvest is coming. Is there a way to get a calendar for my area? And this is from somebody in St. Mary's. Is there an online calendar for City Harvest?
So thanks for that question. City Harvest has what we call mobile markets, where we go to different NYCHA community centers to distribute a variety of produce, usually on a 2-week, every other week schedule. St. Mary's is one of those, just for context for everyone. And we actually have a full mobile market team that works with resident association, tenant association presidents to get the word out and give out usually digital information about it. But if you call, if they call City Harvest directly, we can give them the direct number. They're always happy to field all those questions and get any material that some of these things we have printed out. We also have on our website, cityharvest.org, if you go to find food, type in any address, and you can find any emergency food program within, or food charity within your neighborhood, as well as their hours of fulfillment as well.
And the mobile market schedule is on the website as well, on that same page.
Terrific. So the next question is, are there any special considerations for students with food insecurities?
Well, I would start off by saying that a lot of the 400 plus food charities that we work with include households with children. So we are directly servicing those families, those parents, those caregivers that have children that, by the way, have always had a high rate of food insecurity, unfortunately. We do have a partnership with an organization that's based out of DC and Texas called Brighter Bites, and we provide food for them to go directly to at least a dozen schools at this point, our early childhood education centers across the city. So, long way of saying that we indirectly, serve students by working with our pantry partners and through this program called Brighter Bites as well.
And also, just in case the person was a college student, that's one of the main things we've been advocating for. Food insecurity among the college population is one of the highest across the city and growing. So a lot of our advocacy work is around how we can provide support to colleges. Food pantries on college campuses, but then there's also the matter of a lot of students don't want the stigma of being seen going to a food pantry. No one wants to be seen. And that brings back to what I was saying about being food insecure. You have to really want the food. You want to stand in the line in front of your neighbors and friends and families. So, and imagine being a college student and peer pressure and everything. So what we've been advocating for is some type of, some of the colleges are doing some type of not an EBT card, but sort of like a store credit, kind of credit card. And looking at different types of models to support college students. It's definitely something, like Jerome said, if you go to our website, if you're a college student or any family that needs food, you can go to to our webpage and just plug in your zip code and you'll find everything that's in your area.
Thank you. And we also have a comment, it's more of a comment rather than a question, thanking us for the event. And a major point that City Harvest mentioned is how we bring funding, policies, and programs that are initiated during large-scale disasters to communities before and after who are experiencing these crises daily. So that really the integration of these disaster food programs for the slow-moving disaster that's poverty in our neighborhoods, and I think that you spoke very eloquently about that. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anybody else in the room? I see in the back.
I just want to double down on what Keith was talking about at Metropolitan College of New York. We have racks by the front door that have bags of everything you could possibly need to prepare meals for, let's say, 3 to 5 days. And students can take those on their way out. Security desk can oversee it, but there's no intervention and it's very anonymous. When that program started, I thought, I don't think this is a thing, and I was totally wrong. People at the expense of college definitely are taken from their food budget, and this was a service that was greatly appreciated by the college students.
Depending on your financial aid status, you can't qualify for SNAP, and that's why a lot of the students are food insecure.
I just wanted to mention, my name is Amjad of the Department of Health. One of the resources that we came across at Big Health was an app called Plentiful. Anybody here knows about Plentiful app? Okay. That is something I wanted to ask. I'm assuming that you already connected with that app to make it a part of your tools. And if so, that's something needs to be promoted. That app, I recommend that, and others that could bring people more in line of what resources are in their community when it comes to food.
I'm actually happy and proud to say that City Harvest Food Bank United Way actually started Plentiful, and it was so important during the pandemic because you didn't have a critical mass of people on the line when there's a shelter-in-place rule. So we use Plentiful so people can schedule when to pick up their food. We can send out notifications, and we actually have been able to leverage Plentiful to survey folks to ask them, how has the government shutdown impacted your family, or if you're nervous about whether or not you'll be able to have enough food when food price inflation or the cost of food is so high. So it's been an incredible tool, and we love Plentiful, and it's a great part for our advocacy work as well.
We have time for one more question from the floor because we have one also online.
I'm sorry.
I co-manage a food pantry. We've delivered 1 million meals since the beginning of the pandemic. We do it every week. We went from a food distribution model, thanks to CERT, which helped out, on that to a pantry, which actually allowed more efficient distribution, of the same sources. And we use Plentiful. That's really great. I would say the problem is that we're trying to solve is we have food, big 250 million pounds of food elsewhere, and then actually getting it to the food pantry, and then meeting the requirements because we also have to deliver, we use food packing, but we have nutritional requirements and all of that, and then we have to have continuity in that because we can't just say, hey, we have no food this week. Okay, so we have to plan so we have deliveries to the clients every week. I would say that whole bottom side is still very hard to manage. And I suggest that you look into that. Plentiful, it really helps on the administrative side, but the middle to bottom of food distribution, you know, is still needs a lot of help. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Wait, did we get through it? No?
No, we have a couple questions online. So the first one, hopefully this is an easy answer. How do we partner and become members with City Harvest?
Okay. My contact information is available on the screen, and as well as Jerome and Keith. There is a process for us, an onboarding process to get our agencies onboarded within the City Harvest Network. So, and we shared our contact information, right? So yeah, I would just say that for those virtually joining us, please email me and I can connect you with the appropriate channels to see how that can be started.
And the last question online is, are there any federal grants that organizations should look into for support with their programs?
I would say yes, definitely. It depends on what type of program you're talking about and its structure. The first thing that comes to my head, and I'm a huge supporter of, is something called the Community Food Project through the United States Department of Agriculture. And what that program does is it provides funding for community-led solutions to food security. So if you have a community group that is starting a food cooperative, if you have a community garden, if you're even a pantry, all of those things, if it's community powered, you can go to the USDA website and apply for that. It comes out every year, and the funding is over a 4-year period, so it does stretch. And then even more generally, federal, state, or city, you should always be looking for discretionary funding from your lawmaker. Invite your elected official to your program. If you take anything from advocacy, invite them and let them see what you do, and that often really sticks in their head. There's a photo opportunity to get to help, and then when it's time to ask them for money during those budget negotiations, which in New York City is like right now or like yesterday, that's the opportunity to do that.
So thank you, City Harvest, for coming and bringing this important issue to the table. And thank you for everybody who joined online and in person into the discussion.